All right, welcome to part two of Empty the Bench, episode 61. I never thought that we would have to do a split, but there was just so much this weekend that we're doing a split. Oh, and a little halftime substitution. Tom Albano now in for Nick Federa. Nick Morgasen still here. So you guys talked all the baseball yesterday. So today we'll run through all the basketball and all the football, kind of appropriate as we lead you up to kickoff if in a little less than an hour from now.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think this is an equal substitution. I don't think there's. It's not like the NBA where if someone goes to COVID, you don't see them for 10 days, or if you're Trevor Lawrence, you're out for 10 days and you don't know when you're going to play next.
Well, we'll talk about Trevor Lawrence. We'll go through our predictions for all the rest of the Week 8 matchups. But first, we got to hit some basketball stuff. And it appears, Mr. Basketball, that do you remember when we were following all the COVID stuff and the MLB and the NBPA just went at it? When are we going to start? How many games is it going to be? All that. Are we even going to have a season? Well, it seems like that has now trickled into the NBA for its plans for 2020-2021 season.
Yeah, well, the NBA and the NBPA are kind of at odds. It's kind of a weird thing, but they worked together during the whole COVID bubble situation. So eventually, the NBPA, Chris Paul being the head, and Michelle Roberts, the head union representative, finally came to a deal, and they ended up playing a full season, even with the COVID lockout going on in the middle. They handled the whole situation well. Now, we can't say that for MLB and NFL. It's a whole different situation. But when Rudy Gobert, just going back in timeline for a second, Rudy Gobert is positive for the Utah Jazz. The whole sport shuts down, and chaos pursues, and they have to figure out how the heck they're going to get all these games in.
Right, and they end up doing the 8-game idea for all those teams who are so close to one another in the standings.
The play-in tournament, right. And so they get done, they play the regular season games, the play-in tournament, they get through it all. Okay. I give credit on both sides because Adam Silver really had to give in to all the NBPA player needs, or else they would have just canceled the season right there.
Right. Well, the only union league owner union problem that we ever had during the COVID stuff was with the MLB. But ironically, the MLB, who we thought was one of the more stronger unions, and then it turned out not exactly all daisies and flowers and everything. And now it seems like that's now here with the NBA. So let's give some context here. So obviously you guys touched upon this last week when I was out. The NBA was looking to start the season on December 22nd. So that way they would have their Christmas Day games and all that, and they would do a slightly reduced schedule of 72 games. That way by June, early July, the season ends. So that way the players can still partake in the Olympic Games. Well, as it turns out, now the union and all the players have other ideas. So there was another idea before that December 22nd plan came out that the NBA would start its season. It would just be a 2021 season. 2020, that would be it, because it would start on January 18th, I believe is the official day, because it's Martin Luther King Day, another big day of NBA games on the schedule.
And there's a lot of issues now. We know the NBA, the numbers came out. I think they lost like $500 million due to where they had to pick up the season, and the bubble I think cost them $150 million a month.
Right. Well, all the leagues and all the team owners ended up losing a ton of money with doing the bubble.
Well, right, because you didn't have the ticket gate sales coming in. You didn't have concessions. You didn't, which people are selling waters for $10 to really $2, and you're getting your profit and money. But I don't know. I mean, the NBA and the NBPA need to get on the same page because in the NBA, the two sides are very strong. This is the one sport where the two sides can work together on certain instances, and on certain aspects they couldn't. Believe it or not, I give them a lot of credit how the two sides handled the civil unrest situation. They handled that well, because if Adam Silver and the ownership, or I don't know what you would call it, the heads of the NBA didn't get on the same page, this season would have been over because the players wouldn't have wanted to play.
Well, we always say that the NBA is it's probably the only league that is player driven. It is that the players make a lot of the say, and the commissioner and the owners, to their credit, or to some people to bad credit, they follow along. But this is going to be the situation, when it's time for the CBA agreement and when it's time for money matters, especially now with the whole bubble situation. This is where we start to see the owners in the league pretty much stomp their foot and say, no, you're going to have to listen to us to some degree.
There's one problem here, which people are not realizing. You were talking about how they're going to play a 72-game shortened season, and the whole reason to stop late June, early July is because they're hoping for participation in the Olympics. But do you really think any NBA player right now is going to participate in the Olympics?
Well, even if they do, or even if they want to or they don't, I listened in part to your conversation you and Nick had last week, and I kind of agree. 72 games in that short amount of time, because you're pretty much saying we're going to do a near full season minus 2 months that it takes us to do a near full season, plus a play-in tournament, full playoff. How are you going to be able to get done? I don't think it's possible.
It's in the regard like what MLB did with 60 games. They were trying to fit in as many games as possible with
right. Little days off. I get that, but with that kind of schedule, plus training camp, if I remember correctly, you said will only be like 3 or 4 weeks.
Well, they were saying originally that training camp was going to start December 1st, but now that that's up in the air, we don't know when training camp.
But my point is,
it's going to be 2 to 3 weeks.
My point is, though, look at MLB. And you saw, even with the shortened season, all the injuries that you had. Look at the NFL right now. They had no training camp. Everything was Zoom. And now, look, you had stars like Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, currently right now, Joe Mixon, Aaron Jones, a lot of the big names.
Odell
Beckham now is out for a lot of the big names are now going down with major injuries because, I have to assume.
Right, and you alerted to what I had said about NBA stars that could go down to injury. Now, excuse me, the other report that I heard is that if they had started training camp on December 1st and they were looking to project the start of the season on December 22nd, there were reports that LeBron and AD and some other stars might just sit out the first 2 weeks of the season. Now, I said this to Nick and I'll say it to you as well. There's really no pressure on LeBron and AD to start the season. They won their championship already.
Correct, but there's pressure on the NBA to have its stars because
they don't lose their money.
Right, the NBA, like I have always said, that there are for the certain leagues, there's certain days that you associate with the leagues. For the NFL, you associate Thanksgiving. For the mixed martial arts world where I'm in, New Year's Eve. For the NBA, Christmas Day is one of those days that you associate. It has a huge slate of games, big markets, big stars. You don't want guys like LeBron James, Anthony Davis, James Harden, Giannis. You don't want them sitting out during those times, during those games.
I wouldn't be surprised, though. I mean, first of all, I think we can take that out of the equation because we don't think they're starting on December 22nd or January 14th. We don't know when they're going to start at this point.
Right, but as I say, I know we had always tended to side with the players, but when the MLB and NBPA was having these issues, but I kind of am in agreement with the owners that if they want to give in to the players, and start on January, you're going to have to do like only a 50-game season because you already have the TV networks pretty much stopping down and saying, if we're going to carry the Olympics, especially NBC, I say I know NBC isn't really in the NBA picture anymore, and I know they used to be in the TV picture, but they're going to want, guys like LeBron, Giannis, all the big names that play in the Olympics, so that way they can get the big TV ratings.
I don't think they're going to. I think due to the whole COVID situation, I'd be surprised even if there is an Olympics. We still don't know if there's going to be an Olympics.
Right, we still don't know that either. But I was going to say, but I think everybody wants their chickens in a row because you saw what's been going on with MLB and the NFL. I think if you take a lesson from those leagues, you need plan A, plan B, plan C. Okay, is the Olympics going to go on? If the Olympics don't go on, if we start on this date, you got to have all these alternatives.
Well, I'll give the NBA credit for one thing that MLB and NFL, and I'll exclude the NHL because I think the NHL has handled this quite well. But I'll say that the NBA is pretty much has multiple plans. I think they've done good in that regard where they say, all right, we're going to set the bubble up. We did it 2 to 3 months in advance. We're ready to send the teams to go. We make sure you do your COVID test and make sure you're positive or negative. If you're positive, you have to stay out of the bubble until you're negative for 2 tests. So I give the NBA the credit in that regard to actually chronologically thinking.
Actually, and that's funny that you mentioned the NHL and you bring up the bubble. The NBA wants arenas again. It does not want to do the bubbles. They would rather, hey, if we get 25 or 50% capacity in these cities, in these arenas, okay, we'll get that so we can get some money going.
Yeah, but some states are still not in the approval.
Right. You're absolutely right. And you mentioned the NHL. When the NBA starts up, since the NBA and NHL share arenas, that would mean the NHL is not far behind. But I mean, look at the NHL. The NHL's already said no, we're already on January, maybe even February. We're not even thinking of starting back up again anytime this year because they still don't know all the international protocols.
Well, I think it also takes longer to train for an NHL season than it does for an NBA season. Don't get me wrong, I'm not insulting athletes from other sports, but I think it takes longer in the NHL protocol to get ready, probably, right?
Mm-hmm. I'd say, and actually in the NBA it goes for this too, hey, the NBA has a team in Toronto. The NHL has plenty of Canadian teams. How is the Canadian-American border going to work? They're full of international stars. How's all the international travel going to be handled?
Well, we have that issue with the Raptors in the NBA, who I think they've already come out and said that they're going to play in Seattle, is what I heard. I don't know how true that is, but that's the report that I heard.
Well, I remember the Toronto Blue Jays in MLB, they had to play in Buffalo this season.
Well, that's another issue they're going to have to figure out. Because again, like you said, you don't know what the international rules. Before we came on into this episode, there was a report that the United Kingdom just closed down their whole country. Other countries outside of the U.S. are starting to lock down again, unfortunately. So what's going to happen if they start locking, and especially if they lock down Canada? Professional sports is going to have a problem, including the NHL, big time.
Definitely. I mean, even if you're the biggest optimist, with this whole COVID situation, with sports leagues, there's a lot of variables and a lot of concerns that still need to be taken care of. So this is going to be an interesting story to follow in the coming weeks.
But what's odd, though, just going back to MLB, because it wraps within this point,
yeah.
We saw that the Globe Life Field had fans for the World Series and for the NLCS?
NLCS, yeah.
So they had fans. Now, I don't know what that means for Major League Baseball if they're going to have fans. I still don't buy that Major League Baseball is going to have a full season next season. Do you?
I don't know. I mean, with how bad we saw the tensions and relations between the MLB and NBPA, are we even going to have a lockout? That's another thing.
They're up for contract, right?
I'd say the CBAs of all the major sports are coming up within the next couple of years. So what a time for this pandemic to, hit. Plus, remember, we had talked about with the MLB and NBPA, if this season, basically went awry, there's a chance that a lockout could come early. So could we see in this offseason, maybe even the offseason afterwards, we see the MLB, the NHL, NBA, could we see lockouts?
And that would be massive pandemonium if it happened.
I was going to say, and you want to talk about, money matters with all the players getting major contracts and everything. We say about this more with MLB, but you can apply it to all the sports. Everything, a lot of the relief has been with the major television contracts. The TV networks paying billions of dollars of rights. If the networks, if the ratings keep slipping, whether it's because people don't care about sports right now, whether it's people protesting, the certain leagues because of civil unrest matters, whatever, if those ratings continue to slip, is that time, that we have been fearing where the TV contracts are going to burst. And then what happens to the sports world with all that, with all the money?
Oh, yeah. Well, TV contracts, if they're not making money, they're just going to pull out and they'll put the money somewhere else eventually. So it's going to be an interesting time, especially when
we're getting to a very pivotal point in the sports world right now.
It's crazy, but all right, where are we at here?
Okay, so before we go on to the NFL, let's talk about Daryl Morey for a second. Daryl Morey, we think that after the Rockets issue, he's going to take time off for himself. No. And of all the teams he is joining the Philadelphia 76ers, who, as of the last year or so, have finally cried uncle on the process, have admitted that it did not work, and they're going to do a new process.
Shocker, surprise. Well, if you look at the move that they made earlier on in the offseason, they signed Doc Rivers to be their head coach on a 5-year deal. believe it or not, Daryl Morey and Doc Rivers have ties from the Celtics organization. Believe it or
Right.
not. So it kind of makes sense in that regard that the two of them met back up in Philly. Now, I think, believe it or not, most people say older coaches, and Nick and I talked about this with Tony La Russa being the manager of the White Sox, is a massive failure because the White Sox are a younger organization and bat flips, and Tony La Russa does not fit that mold whatsoever. In the NBA, it's opposite. Sometimes you have to go from a young coach to a more, well, they didn't have a young coach, they had Brett Brown, but basically Doc Rivers, I think, will come in there and say, hey guys, hey kids, wake up. You have the talent, but you got to work for it, and you got to earn it, and you got to be able to play, or else I'm going to bench you for somebody else.
Right. Well, that's the thing that that you guys talked about with Tony La Russa. He's 70-something years old. He's going to be coaching a team that is full of 20-something-year-olds. One of the youngest teams in MLB is the Chicago White Sox. Plus, it's the analytics era, so those styles tend to not clash. And even then, even with Tony La Russa, if I can stay on MLB for a second, he went out on top. He had one of the most legendary World Series, 2011, the Freese home run to put it to 7 games, the Cardinals winning. He went out on top. You would think he would want to stay away from managing at that point because.
Well, I'll give you one more. I know we're not talking baseball, but the MLB Hall of Fame came out and said that they were not happy with the fact that he came out of retirement to be a manager because they were just. It's not supposed to happen. Once you retire, then you're in the Hall of Fame.
You retire, right. So I don't get it there. But like you were saying, with Doc going over to Philadelphia, is it going to be the best fit? I don't know. I mean, like you were saying about Morey and Doc's ties, like to the Celtics, championship experience, but that was 2008.
Right.
It's 15 years into the future, guys.
Well, but let's talk.
But you're right. But you're right that the 76ers need some fire under them because they've had
somebody that says, "Wake up,"
because they've had talent. They've had talent, come in there, but it isn't enough, or the talent don't put the work in.
And also for guys when we talk about all stars, that sometimes they take over the coaching situation, a la Dwight Howard with Stan Van Gundy in Orlando,
LeBron James with anybody.
LeBron James with anybody, right? Basically, I think Doc comes in and says to Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, shit don't fly, wake up and put the work in. And I think it might make them better players. Sometimes certain stars can't handle that, a la James Harden, who can't work under any coach.
Well, also remember, keep in mind that Daryl Morey is also going to have a responsibility. Daryl Morey, he is alongside James Harden and the Rockets in that, they were constant, they were great in the regular season. How many times have I said this about Harden, why I don't rank him as highly on my top NBA players? Because he gets a great job in the regular season. He can't get it done in the postseason. You can say the same thing with Morey. With Morey, he is going to have a big job to find guys to build around Simmons, to build around Embiid. They need options over there.
But the weird thing about the Rockets is the 1B was really a 2B in my regard. And for what I mean by that is you have your tier 1, which is a James Harden, which is a very low tier 1. And then you had a very low tier 2 player in Russell Westbrook, who's really not a tier 2. He's more of a role player than a tier 2.
You also in the past had CP3, who was another guy, infamous, great with the regular season. When the postseason comes, just disappears.
And I think also Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, I think they can be comparable players. I think they can play together, but I think Doc needs to say, hey, you guys have talent, but you're not going to win just on your talent. Your talent doesn't win in this league. Ask LeBron James when he led the Cavaliers. He tried to win it all on talent, and he couldn't do it.
Right. He's big playoff LeBron. I say time and time again, he can do it on his own. But, when you get to that final game and it's, Nick Federa and I say it all the time, a team does not make.
Oh, yeah, it's true. Because you need a second star. Look how the Lakers won this year. Anthony Davis. It was LeBron and Anthony Davis. And then you had role players like Danny Green, who's turning into that Ray Allen figure, being on a couple of teams now.
Right. And I'll eat crow for that because I had said that I would have trusted the Clippers more than the Lakers at the start of the season because I thought, hey, the Clippers have more noticeable depth to them because they ended up taking the Warriors a good, 6 games, I think it was, in the playoffs last year. But
Right.
it turns out.
But the one thing I will add, and this is the issue with the Sixers, chemistry issues, which is what the Clippers had.
Mhm.
Because Paul George he came out, right, but Paul George came out with the anxiety issues and not being able to deal with people on social media, and and injuries. Now we found out now that he's an injury havoc. Kawhi, who's really good in the playoffs. Obviously, we saw him lead a whole team in Toronto, but obviously the chemistry was not there with him and Paul George.
Well, I'll also give the Lakers credit in that these players, who I thought, they got nothing in terms of depth. They developed, like you said, it's a great role players around AD and LeBron.
Well, and AD wanted to play with LeBron. I think that you have to look in that regard as well, that sometimes when you put 2 big-time stars together, or 3, if you want to talk about OKC back in the day with KD, James Harden, and Russell Westbrook, even though they were a good team and it was a good dynamic, it was 3 ball hogs on one team that wanted to control the basketball. And that's eventually why they broke up, because they couldn't play together. So if you look at AD and LeBron he's the set guy. He's the point man, even though he's a big 6 foot plus. He's the point man, and AD is basically the center. And we're just going to play big boy ball down the center from LeBron to AD. That's why it works.
Right. So, to wrap things up here on the NBA, I think the stock move can be good, but like you said, I have my doubts because Morey and Doc, like I said, it was 15 years ago when they had their, great heyday in Boston, but it's like we said, the Sixers need a fire under them. They need Morey to give them a couple of pieces here and there to build around Simmons and Embiid. They need Simmons and Embiid to step up, and hopefully Rivers is the catalyst, can be the fire. And by the way, just to mention go back at the COVID stuff that we were just talking about with the first NBA issue. So I just got an alert on my phone that apparently travelers in the New York City area, travelers must now test negative 3 days before entering New York. Then they must quarantine for 3 days and test negative again. So
that was a Cuomo thing, I think, right?
Yeah. So you're seeing a lot
changes.
A lot of changes back, steps backwards. So it's going to be
the one final thing I'll say, because we'll move on to some NFL and some other COVID stuff, is I'm tired of this perception that we hear Daryl Morey is the top executive in all of the NBA, and if you plug him in anywhere, he's going to take that team to the top. I'm tired. I'm sure you've heard this in other sports too, that the stars of the sport, if you plug LeBron anywhere, he's going to win a championship. Or if you plug Daryl Morey into any front office in the NBA, he's going to win a championship. It's not how it works. That's just a perceptionary thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's a dumb thing. It's putting more pressure on somebody when they already have enough pressure. Let the guy come in. Let him change the furniture. Let him put his surroundings in, and then let him go to work instead of putting this perception on somebody. Because you're setting a guy up for failure. Like we saw LeBron. How many times did he fail before he won? All because of high pressure situation.
Right. It took him about 10 years.
10 years
after he entered the league to finally claim a championship.
Right. So everybody take it easy. Let Morey come in. Let him do his job, and let's see how he does after a year or two, and then we can judge.
All right. Fair enough. So now let's go to the football. Very quickly before we go to our picks. COVID has reared its ugly head once again across the football world.
Including here in New York.
Right. So the Chargers, the Los Angeles Chargers, the New York Giants, and the Houston Texans, who are on a bye week, thankfully enough in their case, have experienced at least one positive case each. Fortunately enough, it was bad because over here in New York with the Giants, most of the offensive line got sent home for a day. But fortunately, in all the cases of the teams, everybody's tested negative except for, I guess, the couple of positive cases. So all the games are on. But a little interesting side note here, it also affects the college football world. Trevor Lawrence, the projected number 1 overall pick in the 2021 NFL draft, has tested positive for COVID-19, and he will be out He missed yesterday's game. I believe Clemson was playing this week.
Yes.
So he missed this week, and he's going to miss this coming week.
Well, okay, let's go back to that for a second because I actually did some research on this. That depending on when his first day being out was, because I think according to their protocol, the divisions they play.
Like if it came middle of the week or not.
Right, depending on when the first day was, the 10th day would have allowed him to come back to play Notre Dame. So I don't know where his first day was. It depends where his first day is. If he gets to 10 days, he then would have to test, I think, 2 times more negative, and then he could probably play or was allowed to play. Right. So I don't know. That's big news when your projected number 1 overall pick is testing positive for the virus.
Right. I was going to say, I mean, we've seen, Cam Newton. I mean, obviously we'll still have to see today if he rebounds. But last week, it was his first game back since COVID, and he looked terrible. He looked absolutely terrible. And he ended up getting benched for Jarrett Stidham. We'll see how he does later today when the Pats play the Bills. But also, Rycole Armstead of the Jacksonville Jaguars, who was going to be one of the big running backs. Everyone thought in the offseason he may have taken over when Leonard Fournette got released by the team. But he ended up battling COVID twice, ended up doing bad in training camp, got hospitalized twice, and now he's done for the year. We're not going to see Armstead until next year. And even then, people are still skeptical. And remember, these guys, are built athletes. These guys are great athletes. There's a coworker of mine who has somebody, who is young, great in shape, and they got struck with COVID bad. It's like, this disease, it affects everybody in different ways. It may not affect one person. It may affect somebody, it may affect them really bad, even if they are in great shape and in great health. So if you want my personal opinion, I don't think it's going to be too much longer before the NFL gives in and says, we're going to have an 18th week. Because I got a bad feeling about this.
And we saw the reports. We didn't get to talk about this either, which the Super Bowl is going to allow, I think, 20 to 30% capacity at Raymond James Stadium.
Yeah.
And they're going to have pods. So we're going to be pod people at the Super Bowl. So
great.
I know. Well, I also read that ESPN is not sending its people to the game either.
Wow. Okay. That's interesting. I didn't hear that.
So, because one, they probably don't want to spend the money, and they're making an excuse so they don't have to send their people either. But
they don't have to put them at risk.
Well, that's what they're saying. But at the same time, they don't want to spend the money. But I understand the reason. But, whew, yeah. So, all right, you want to make some picks?
Yeah, let's make some picks. All right, let's get to the rapid rundown. Oh, by the way, actually, one more thing I do have to mention, because we didn't talk about it. So if a Week 18 does happen, what's going to happen is because there is no Pro Bowl this season, what will happen is if there's a Week 18, it will take the spot of whatever wild card weekend was supposed to be, and everything will be pushed back. There just will not be a bye week between the conference championship and Super Bowl, which is pretty much going to be the NFL sign of saying, let's get this bleep show season over with.
And I wish they would just do this and stop it with the 2 weeks in between. Like, let's just promote the Super Bowl for 2 weeks. And
well,
actually,
I think they do it to rest all the players and everything, plus the Pro Bowl.
But you notice, it's going to be weird because we're not going to have Super Bowl row this year due to COVID. But usually you see all the players going out there with their sponsors and doing all their fanfare for 2 weeks, which all the radio stations get pissed off at because they think that they're getting an interview, but they're really getting an interview to talk about a sponsor. So who knows?
All right, let's make some picks here.
Okay.
All right, here we go. Rapid rundown time. So we're going to start off Week 8, 1 o'clock games, Vikings and the Packers.
Now, actually, there's a lopsided amount of afternoon games this week, right?
I believe – is it this week or next week?
I thought there was only 4 1 o'clock games today.
Really? Let me double check. No, I think that's next – yeah, next week there's going to be 5 1 o'clock games and then 6 or 7 4 o'clock games. Yeah, that's next week.
Actually, it's the other way. There's 3 4 o'clock games. That's what it is.
3 4 o'clock. Yeah. Actually, no. And by the way, it's not till week 10. Week 10 is when we have the lopsidedness you were talking about. But anyway, Vikings and the Packers. Packers are going to be without Aaron Jones, but I don't think that's going to be too much a big deal because Jamal Williams really stepped up last week. And the Vikings defense, I have a lot of questions around. I'm going to go with the Pack. And they're in Lambeau. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty obvious. Yeah, I'd take the Pack because there's some questions with the Vikings.
Steelers and the Ravens. Steelers, the last undefeated team in the NFL, but it's two tough defenses.
It's a good matchup too. Big Ben versus
Lamar Jackson. It is past versus future here. It's going to be close. I think this one's going to be.
I like the Steelers.
You do? Okay.
I do. Yeah.
I'm going to go the other way. I think the future's going to win. I think we're going to have no undefeated teams after week 8. I'm going Ravens.
I just think the Steeler offense is a tough thing to stop. Their receivers are some of the best in football right now.
True. And for the record, Nick also says Packers, and he is going with the Steelers. He's going with you. All right, Colts versus Lions.
Yuck.
Yeah, it's a yuck matchup. The Lions
in Detroit. Yep.
Wait, you're going with Lions or?
No, I'm saying it's in Detroit.
Oh yeah, it is in Detroit. I'm just saying the Lions last week ended up getting the. Oh, was that the Todd Gurley game that they came back in?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, that another blown game from the Falcons. So I'm just gonna go Colts.
Yeah, I don't like Detroit at all. Colts.
Pats and the Bills. Like I mentioned, Cam Newton was struggling last week, and the Pats around him are just it's not good. It's not good right now. I'm going to go with the Bills.
Yeah, the Bills, I mean, the Bills got to figure out – they have a good offense, but they got to figure out how to play around Josh Allen. That's a big situation.
I agree. But I think if they get the win over the Pats this week, that's just going to demonstrate that the AFC East is now the Bills' division.
To me, it's like a cement mixer game. Like, if they can really figure out – if they win this game, I think they're asserting their dominance in the division.
Correct. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
All right. So Nick also agrees Colts Bills. Now we have Titans versus the Bengals. The Titans lost a tough matchup last week. They lost their unbeaten record this week. As good as Joe Burrow is and the plentiful amount of options around him for receivers. Yeah, and even though Gio Bernard also did an okay job filling in for Mick, the Titans are going to have a fire under them. I'm going with Tennessee on this one.
Titans are going to win. Too many injuries.
All right, Raiders and the Browns. Odell Beckham Jr., of course, done for the year. Baker Mayfield last week, first quarter, had 0 passing yards and 1 interception, and he explodes over the next three quarters. Ends up having, for you fantasy people, a 40 or 50-point game. And, I think the Raiders are a tough matchup. I think they're a tough team, but their passing defense is pretty horrendous. And I have an eye, by the way, on one Brown in particular. This kid that's popped up, Rashad Higgins, now that Odell Beckham is out and Landry's taking over.
Also.
Higgins, I've got to feel – I'll give a take right now. I think today we're going to see a big matchup for Higgins. I think we're going to see a really good game from him.
But you know what that tells me also, just to – because you're saying that Baker had a 40 or 50-point fantasy game after having nothing in the first quarter. Yeah. Odell Beckham means nothing to him, unfortunately. I know that's a really hot take, but I don't think Odell is really adding anything to this offense.
I'll follow up with one thing here. I think, and we see this in fantasy. We tend to see this in fantasy, but especially in this season, it seems like wide receiver ones are just decoys. Like
pretty much, yeah.
With Odell, he gets double teamed or doesn't get anything. Landry gets the thing, gets him more. And
Landry is the big name for Baker. Yeah,
Landry, and maybe that'll switch now with Landry and Higgins, and we see that with the Falcons with Julio and Ridley and Gage. But I'm gonna go with the Browns. I see a good matchup here for them.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I wanted to take the Raiders, as soon as Odell went down, I just don't think the Raiders have much offense either, let alone defense. So I would take the Browns, but I think it's going to be a sloppy offensive game, though.
Chiefs and the Jets. I think your team's getting spanked this week.
Sorry, my head was in the clouds over there. Yeah, this is going to be Chiefs, and it's going to be a whomping to the point where Adam Gase should be fired after this game, but we know it's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Rams and the Dolphins. It is the first NFL start for Tua Tagovailoa.
He's going to get crushed. He's going to get crushed by the Rams.
That's it. The Rams have been one of the most surprising teams of this season.
But I just think they're going to get crushed because the Rams have one of the top defenses in the NFL,
Mm-hmm.
and Tua hasn't started a game, so he's going to get hit like a ton of bricks.
I agree. And, he is very injury prone. He was, at least in college. I wouldn't be surprised if Fitzpatrick comes back during the season.
I'm here. I'm still here, even though I made the comment that I'm sad that I was taken out as a starter. I'm still here.
Chargers and the Broncos. I think Justin Herbert is going to have another very, very good game. I'm going with the Chargers in this one.
Yeah, the Broncos are a giant question mark. Chargers.
Saints and the Bears. As tough as the Bears' defense is.
This is a good matchup, believe it or not, which is so weird because of the records. People consider record versus record. Aren't they like 6-0, the Bears?
The Bears they only have 1 or 2 losses this whole season.
Oh, they're not undefeated anymore?
No. The Bears are 5-2 and the Saints are 4-2.
So sick. Like how the Bears have one of the better records in the NFL, and it's all because of Nick Foles.
Mm-hmm. But
Michael Thomas is out, though.
Michael Thomas is out again, but you know what? I still believe Alvin Kamara can really produce for this team. I think Alvin Kamara can overcome the defense. I'm going to go with the Saints.
But we've seen just as one point with Michael Thomas being out, not having his number one target is big for Breeze.
It is.
Because you're just going to double team the second target, and then there goes your game. They'll double team Kamara, and that'll be the end of the.
But actually, it's funny that you say that. I completely forgot. Allen Robinson is doubtful. He's looking like he's not going to play.
To me, that makes it like a coin flip, really.
Right, because both wide receiver ones are out.
Where is this game being played? In Chicago?
It is being played.
Yes,
in Soldier Field.
I mean, this is a coin flip at best. If both number one receivers are out.
Right. Well, Nick's going with the Saints. I'm going to go Saints as well.
I'm going to go Bears just because I think Nick Foles is holding up momentum, and I just think without Michael Thomas, I think the Saints are in trouble.
49ers, Seahawks. As good 49ers have been, even with their injuries, I think the Seahawks are just going to be way too much.
Yeah, go ahead.
Even with with the running back field in absolute shambles, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, I could see Russell Wilson having a big throwing day.
This would have been good if this was a full-strength game on both sides. This would have been probably your number one game, actually. But Seattle is just on fire. 49ers have too many injuries. Jimmy G now looks like he's overpaid and might be on the way out. So Seattle.
Okay, Sunday Night Football, Cowboys versus Eagles. A bunch of injuries all around.
Andy Dalton officially out. What's the backup quarterback again?
Hang on one second. Ben DiNucci.
Who the? What the? Exactly.
And the Eagles, as much as, the Eagles, I have to give Carson Wentz credit. He has turned it around over the last month. And even if they don't have Miles Sanders, Boston Scott, as long as he's playing, he's looked great. I got to go Eagles here.
I feel bad for NBC having a primetime game with the NFC least. Like, what the hell? What do you think NBC, before the season, was looking at this kid and said, oh, my God, we have the Eagles versus the Saints. We have Carson Wentz versus Dak.
I was going to say, as bad as their records would have still been, it would have been like this could be a big divisional matchup.
The sad and sick part of this is that it is technically a big divisional matchup.
It still is, yeah.
And it's going to take like 5 wins to win this division, which is kind of sick. And with Andy Dalton out, Dak long gone, it's going to be Eagles.
Okay, Bucks and the Giants on Monday night. You talk about how bad they're – I think that what's attracting ESPN to this matchup is it's Brady. It's Brady against the Giants, even though this is not the same Giants team from 10 years ago.
Even in New York, they're going to get they're going to get so blown out, it's not even fun.
All right, Week 9, Thursday Night Football. Interesting matchup, Packers, 49ers. Again, as much as the 49ers, have done well with their injuries, an offense like the Packers is just going to be too much. I'm going with Green Bay.
Yeah, Green Bay all the way. Niners just too injury prone.
All right, so that's going to do it from us, guys. Enjoy your slate of NFL games today. We'll see you this next weekend for Nick Morgasen and Nick Videra. I'm Tom Albano. See you guys around. Good night.
See you.